What happens when Hollywood royalty meets daytime television's most fearless interrogators? You won't believe what unfolds when Meghan Markle faces off against a View's powerhouse panel in one of the most explosive confrontations in talk show history. This isn't your typical celebrity interview. This is a full-blown verbal battlefield where pleasantries are abandoned and the gloves come off completely. Before we dive into this story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what happens when these titans clash in an epic showdown that had viewers across America glued to their screens. The tension was palpable the moment Meghan Markle walked onto the View set. Something felt different about this appearance. There was an electric charge in the air that veteran viewers sensed immediately. Whoopi Goldberg sat center stage with her trademark stern expression, while Joy Behar flanked her left, a mischievous glint in her eye hinting at the cutting remarks to come. Sunny Hostin and Sarah Haynes completed the formidable quartet. Both armed with research folders that seemed unusually thick for a routine promotional interview, Meghan entered wearing an immaculate cream-colored blazer, her signature confident smile in place. But even casual observers could detect a defensiveness beneath the surface that hadn't appeared in her previous media appearances. The audience applauded politely, but the energy felt restrained, almost cautious, as if everyone sensed they were about to witness something extraordinary. "Welcome back to The View," Whoopi began, her authoritative voice commanding immediate attention. "We're here with Meghan Markle, and we've got some questions I think America has been waiting to hear answered." The camera caught a subtle shift in Meghan's posture, shoulders straightening almost imperceptibly, her smile tightening slightly. Joy wasted no time diving into controversial territory. "Meghan, let's talk about your recent comments regarding the royal family. You've made some serious allegations, but many people are wondering where's the proof. You've painted yourself as a victim, but critics say you knew exactly what you were getting into when you married into the world's most famous monarchy." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Meghan's media training kicked in as she maintained her composure, though viewers could see her grip tighten slightly on her coffee mug. "That's a very unfair characterization of my experience," Meghan replied. "I've always been transparent about the challenges I faced, and I've never claimed to be a victim. I've simply shared my truth about navigating an institution that many people don't fully understand." "Your truth," Sunny interjected, leaning forward. "But what about the palace's truth? They released statements contradicting several of your claims. Staff members who worked closely with you have come forward with very different accounts. How do you reconcile that discrepancy?" The temperature in the room seemed to rise. Meghan's jaw tightened, but her voice remained steady. "I find it interesting that people are so quick to believe palace statements when it serves their narrative, but when I speak about my lived experiences, suddenly there's a credibility issue. These are the same people who remained silent when I was being torn apart in the British press." Sarah Haynes jumped in with surgical precision. "But that's exactly the point some people are making. You've built a brand around speaking your truth. Critics argue your version keeps evolving. First it was media treatment, then racism within the royal family, then being silenced. Which is it really? And why should viewers believe this version over previous ones?" The panel operated like a well-oiled machine, each host building on the previous question, creating an increasingly uncomfortable situation for their guest. Meghan's public relations training was being tested as she defended not just her actions, but her credibility on national television. "I think what you're failing to understand," Meghan replied, her voice gaining an edge, "is that these weren't separate issues. They were all interconnected. Media treatment was influenced by racial bias. The institution's response was about maintaining their image at my expense. And yes, I was silenced when I tried to address these issues through proper channels." Whoopi leaned back, studying Meghan like a prosecutor sizing up a witness. "Here's what I'm struggling with, and I think a lot of viewers are too. You had access to resources, support systems, and platforms most people facing discrimination could only dream of. You had Prince Harry, legal teams, PR experts, yet you're telling us you were powerless. That doesn't add up for many people." The words hit like a verbal slap. Meghan's composure cracked slightly, a flash of genuine anger breaking through her carefully maintained facade. "So, because I had resources, I should have just accepted being treated unfairly. Because I married into privilege, I'm supposed to forfeit the right to speak out against injustice. That's exactly the kind of thinking that perpetuates these problems." Joy sensed blood in the water and moved in for another strike. "But here's the thing, Meghan, a lot of people see this as you wanting to have your cake and eat it too. You wanted the royal titles, the prestige, the global platform, but when the responsibilities and constraints weren't to your liking, you walked away while keeping the benefits. Can you understand why that might rub people the wrong way?" The accusation landed hard. For the first time since the interview began, Meghan seemed genuinely rattled. Her hands shifted restlessly in her lap, and her smile disappeared entirely. "That is such a reductive way to look at the situation, and frankly, it's insulting. You're suggesting I should have remained in a situation that was damaging to my mental health and well-being, just to satisfy public expectations. But the hosts weren't backing down. This was The View at its most relentless for experienced interviewers known for asking the questions others wouldn't dare. They sensed their guests' growing discomfort and fed off it. Each question sharper than the last dot. The commercial break couldn't come soon enough. But even when the cameras stopped rolling, the tension remained, thick enough to cut. Meghan sat rigidly in her chair, no longer maintaining her media-friendly demeanor when she thought no one was watching. The hosts huddled together, clearly strategizing their next move. None of them realized they had only scratched the surface of what would become a confrontation for the ages. When the cameras rolled again, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Gone was any pretense of a friendly celebrity chat. This was now a full-scale interrogation. Meghan returned to her seat with her jaw set in a tight line, her earlier diplomatic smile replaced by barely concealed irritation. The hosts exchanged knowing glances. They had drawn blood, and they weren't about to let up. "Welcome back," Whoopi announced, her voice carrying an ominous undertone. "We're here with Meghan Markle, and we're having what I think is a very necessary conversation about accountability and truth-telling." The word truth-telling landed like a verbal grenade. Meghan's eyes flashed with unmistakable anger. Joy picked up exactly where they left off, this time with even sharper precision. "Meghan, during the break, you seemed pretty upset by our questions. But I have to ask, if you're going to make your living telling your story publicly, shouldn't you be prepared to defend that story when people have legitimate questions about inconsistencies?" Inconsistencies. Meghan's voice rose slightly, her composure starting to crack. "What inconsistencies? I've been completely consistent about my experiences. Just because my truth doesn't align with what some people want to believe doesn't make it inconsistent." Sunny leaned forward, her legal training evident in her prosecutorial tone. "Let's talk specifics then. In your Oprah interview, you claimed you were suicidal and received no help from the royal institution. But palace sources, and we verified this, say you were offered multiple resources, including counseling services, which you declined. How do you explain that contradiction?" The question hit like a lightning bolt. Meghan's face flushed, and for a moment she seemed speechless. When she finally responded, her voice had a sharp edge. "Those palace sources weren't in my shoes. They weren't living my experience. The help they claimed they offered came with conditions and restrictions that would have made my situation worse, not better." "What conditions?" Sarah pressed immediately, not giving Meghan a moment to regroup. "Because, from the outside, it looks like you were offered genuine help and chose not to take it, then later claimed you were abandoned. That's a serious accusation if it's not entirely accurate." The room buzzed with tension. Meghan shifted uncomfortably, her hands clenching and unclenching. "You're twisting everything I've said. This is exactly what I mean about being attacked when I try to tell my truth. I'm sitting here being interrogated like I'm on trial instead of having a conversation." "But you are on trial, in a way," Whoopi said bluntly, her signature directness cutting through the air. "You've made very serious accusations against one of the world's most respected institutions. You've claimed racism, neglect, and systematic mistreatment. Those aren't light accusations, and people have every right to examine them closely." Meghan's mask was slipping fast, her voice sharpened, turning defensive. "So I should just stay quiet and accept mistreatment because questioning it makes people uncomfortable. That's exactly the mentality that allows these systems to continue operating unchecked." Joy saw the moment with ruthless efficiency. "Nobody's saying you should stay quiet, but people are saying your story keeps changing. First, Harry was your protector. Then suddenly, he was complicit in your mistreatment. First, the royal family welcomed you. Then they were racist from day one. Which version should we believe?" "My story hasn't changed," Meghan snapped, her voice rising enough to make everyone in the studio take notice. "What's changed is people's willingness to listen without prejudice. You're doing exactly what the British media did, twisting my words and creating contradictions that don't exist." The hosts sensed they had hit a nerve and pressed their advantage. Sunny jumped back in with devastating precision. "Let's talk about the British media then. You've claimed they treated you differently than Kate Middleton, but side-by-side comparisons show the coverage was actually quite similar. Both of you faced intense scrutiny. The difference is Kate never publicly complained or used it as a platform for victimhood." The comparison to Kate Middleton clearly triggered Meghan. Her professional facade began to crumble on camera. "Victim? You think speaking out against actual racism and discrimination is playing victim? This is unbelievable. I came here expecting an adult conversation, not to be ambushed and gaslit on national television." "Nobody's gaslighting you," Whoopi countered firmly. "We're asking legitimate questions that millions of Americans want answered. If your story is true, defend it with facts, not emotion." Sarah moved in for another calculated strike. "Here's what's confusing viewers. Meghan, you say you want privacy and to be left alone, but you've done multiple high-profile interviews. You have lucrative media deals. You're constantly in the spotlight. How do you reconcile wanting privacy while courting publicity?" Meghan was visibly struggling, her breathing slightly labored under the mounting pressure. "I never said I wanted complete privacy. I said I wanted fair treatment and the right to control my own narrative instead of having it controlled by people with malicious intent." Malicious intent. Joy pounced immediately. So everyone who questions your account has malicious intent. The palace staff, the British public, even people here in America who have concerns about your story, they're all acting with malicious intent. The question was expertly crafted to put Meghan in an impossible position. If she said yes, she would sound paranoid and defensive. If she said no, she'd have to acknowledge legitimate questions existed about her narrative. She chose a third option: deflection through outrage. "This is incredible," she said, her voice tight with barely controlled anger. "I'm being treated like a hostile witness instead of a guest. You've clearly made up your minds about me before I even walked in. This isn't journalism. This is character assassination disguised as an interview." Character assassination. Whoopi's response was swift and cutting. "We're asking you to back up claims you've made publicly. If questioning your story constitutes character assassination, maybe the problem isn't with the questions, it's with the story itself." The studio fell silent except for the hum of cameras capturing every micro-expression on Meghan's face. She sat frozen, realizing she had walked into a trap far more sophisticated than anticipated. The hosts had systematically dismantled her talking points, exposed contradictions, and cornered her into a position where any response would make her look bad. But they weren't finished. The silence stretched before Joy delivered the knockout blow. "Meghan, let's talk about something that's been bothering a lot of people. You've positioned yourself as a champion for women's rights and equality, but you've also been accused of bullying female staff at Kensington Palace. Multiple women have come forward with these allegations. How do you square that circle?" The question hit like a nuclear bomb. Meghan's face went through shock, anger, and almost panic. Her composure didn't just crack, it shattered. "That is absolutely outrageous," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "Those allegations were investigated and found to be absolutely." "They weren't," Sunny interrupted with prosecutorial precision. "The investigation results were never made public. The palace simply said they had addressed the matter internally. That's not the same as being cleared, is it?" Meghan's hands trembled visibly. "I cannot believe you're bringing up unsubstantiated gossip as if it's fact. This is exactly the kind of treatment I've been talking about. No man would be subjected to this kind of character assassination based on anonymous accusations." Sarah leaned in for the kill. "But they weren't anonymous, were they? We have names. We have specific incidents. Jason Knopf, your former communications secretary, filed an official complaint. Melissa Toabdi, your personal assistant, left her job citing the stress of working for you. These aren't faceless accusers. These are professional people who put their careers on the line to speak out." The mention of specific names and incidents hit hard. Meghan looked genuinely trapped for the first time in the interview. Her breathing became rapid and shallow, and she glanced around as if searching for an escape. "This is unconscionable," she whispered, barely audible. "You're ambushing me with one-sided hit pieces." Whoopi moved in for the final blow, her authority unmistakable. "Meghan, here's the bottom line. You've built your entire post-royal brand on being the victim of an unfair system. But what if you weren't just a victim? What if you were also a perpetrator? What if the real story is that you couldn't handle the pressure and expectations of royal life, so you lashed out at the people trying to help you, then blamed everyone else when it backfired?" The accusation hung in the air like a death sentence. Meghan stared at Whoopi with undisguised hatred, her facade of wounded dignity completely abandoned. "How dare you?" she said, her voice low and dangerous. "How dare you sit there and psychoanalyze me based on palace propaganda and tabloid gossip? You don't know me. You don't know what I went through." "Then tell us," Joy challenged. "Stop deflecting and tell us your side of the bullying allegations. Explain why multiple women independently came forward with similar stories about your behavior. Make us understand." But Meghan was beyond rational explanation. Now she was operating purely on emotion, and it was not pretty to watch. "I don't owe you an explanation for lies and smears. I don't have to sit here and be attacked by people who have already decided I'm guilty of whatever they want to accuse me of." The hosts exchanged glances. They had pushed their guest to the breaking point, and they knew it, but they also knew they were witnessing television history. This wasn't just an interview anymore. It was a complete meltdown happening in real time. Sunny delivered what would be the final question of the interview. "Meghan, you talk a lot about accountability and truth-telling. Here's your chance. Take accountability for your own actions. Admit that maybe, just maybe, you weren't the perfect victim you've portrayed yourself to be. Admit that you made mistakes, that you hurt people, that you bear some responsibility for how things went wrong." The request for accountability was the final straw. Meghan's eyes blazed with fury as she leaned forward. "I will not be lectured about accountability by a group of women who have built their careers on tearing down other women. This entire interview has been a setup from the beginning. You invited me here under false pretenses to humiliate me on national television." "Nobody's humiliating you," Whoopi said calmly. "We're asking you to defend statements you've made publicly. If you can't handle that level of scrutiny, maybe you shouldn't be making those statements in the first place." That was it. Meghan snapped completely. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "I'm done with this," she announced, her voice carrying across the stunned studio. "I came here in good faith to have a conversation, and instead, I've been subjected to a coordinated attack designed to destroy my reputation." The cameras captured every second as she began removing her microphone. With shaking hands, "This is not journalism," she continued, her voice rising. "This is a hit job, and I will not participate in it for another second." Joy tried one last time to regain control. "Meghan, if you just sit back down, I will not sit back down." Meghan cut her off sharply. "I will not continue to be abused by people who have already made up their minds about me. This interview is over." The studio erupted into chaos. Producers frantically signaled from off. Audience members murmured in shock. The host sat in stunned silence as their guest prepared to make her dramatic exit. Meghan turned to face the cameras directly, her final words delivered with the fury of someone who felt completely betrayed. "To anyone watching, no, this is what happens when you try to speak truth to power. This is what happens when you challenge systems of oppression. They don't engage with your arguments, they try to destroy you personally." With that, she turned on her heel and walked off the set, leaving her microphone on the floor and the entire studio in stunned silence. The cameras followed her exit, capturing every step until she disappeared behind the curtain. Whoopi was the first to recover, turning to face the camera with the poise of a seasoned broadcaster. "Well, that was certainly unexpected," she said, her voice steady despite the chaos that had just unfolded. "When we come back, we'll discuss what just happened and get your thoughts from social media." As the show cut to commercial, the studio remained electric with tension. The hosts had achieved their explosive television moment, but at what cost? They had systematically dismantled their guest's narrative, exposed her contradictions, and pushed her to a complete emotional breakdown. On live television, the confrontation was over, but the fallout had only just begun. Within minutes, clips of Meghan's dramatic exit would be circulating across every social media platform, analyzed and dissected by millions of viewers who had witnessed one of the most explosive celebrity meltdowns in television history. The View had lived up to its reputation for fearless questioning, but they had also created a moment that would define both their show and their guest for years to come. It was television at its rawest and most unfiltered, and absolutely nobody who watched it would ever forget what they had just witnessed.